Hello, my name's Sita Brahmachari and I am a children's and young adult author. I am sitting here today in the most inspirational wood and I'm here to share with you some of my storytelling inspirations for your young writers competition. I'm going to give you some of my tricks when I write about trees. Your theme is the tree, and you will all have a tree, a magical tree, and you may have a wood too. The birds seem to be in competition with me at the moment as I'm speaking. They are just charging my imagination with energy. And this particular tree is full of stories for me. I haven't got time to tell you what all of the stories are, but if I sort of describe the tree to you, it's sort of slightly like a dinosaur. It would appear to be dead, but in fact, on closer inspection, you'll find it has rerouted itself and it's alive. You can only imagine how it was felled. It's obviously been felled before its time, so perhaps part of a big storm, like in my story, Where the River Runs Gold. So my stories don't come from purely my imagination. They come from wandering around these woods and letting my imagination roam, my random imagination roam. They also come from details as well. So as I'm sitting on this tree, I'm looking at the kind of gnarly bark of the tree and I'm kind of imagining a very old person's skin. Well, from that strange imagining came the character of Elder in Red Leaves. Red Leaves is actually set in this wood. It's a story of 3 young people who run away from home for different reasons into an ancient wood, and there they find these magical trees. These are the sort of trees that you can enter and you're in one country or place, and you can leave this tree and you can be in another place. I think that's the amazing thing about trees, is because their roots go underground, our imagination can also go underground with them. And then quite often you've got these trunks which kind of are very much in our real world. They reach up way beyond us. They've lived for thousands of years, before us. And so like our human egos look at these trees and we wonder, wow, what must it be like? What can that tree have seen? So you can see that my wild and random imagination is fired by so many thoughts as I walk through these woods. As I've been looking onto this tree that I thought I knew, I've seen 2 love hearts that are here. So for some people, this tree obviously has a specific meaning, and they've got initials in those love hearts too. There's a large one and there's a small one. And actually, as I look at the bark of this tree, it's scored by so many different stories. Some of the stories have been created by nature, the storms that have come, and some of the stories have created by the people who have sat here. And there must be so many stories. And like if you did a kind of time release camera over time and had the stories that are around this tree, you would start to see so many books and stories emerging. But trees, as you're writing about trees, you don't have to be confined to the real world. In my story, Where the River Runs Gold, I walked through this wood and I thought to myself, wow, this wood is such a great place for me in this city to come to. I almost feel like I could be anywhere in the world. And I walked through this wood once with a young person. I write a lot about refugee, the experience of being a refugee in my stories. And I walked through this wood with a young man who arrived in this country at the age of 14. And he looked up at the wood and he said, "This is like a wild forest." And I said, "Yes, isn't it amazing, because it's in the middle of London?" So once you walk into the wood with your imagination, you really can roam anywhere you want to go. With Where the River Runs Gold, you can see that on the front cover of this book, there is a tree, but it's also a lung. So, your tree may be one thing. Your tree may be a tree, but it might also be a human. Your tree may be symbolic of something else altogether. In certain very famous books that you might have read, the trees can walk from one place to another. Their roots literally reach out like feet, and they start to move across the city. You can go anywhere you want to. But in this book, I imagined what it would be like without trees in the world. And the young people in this story although they're not allowed to paint trees because it's too upsetting to think of a world where trees no longer exist. They become graffiti tree artists and paint trees wherever they go. So I'm going to read you a little bit from this story, where Shifa, whose name means healing, she discovers an enormous graffiti of a blossom tree outside the compound where she lives. Shifa had heard about an underground movement of artists breaking Ark law by painting trees, flowers, plants, and bees on walls all over the city, but they're yet to see them. She gasped at the beauty of the giant painting. If she closed her eyes and opened them just a little, she could imagine that she was standing in front of a real tree. What would it smell like? Sweet? Aunt Lottie thought the graffiti artists were likely to be outlanders or foragers, as she preferred to call herself, and her ever-growing brand of friends. Lottie said, only people with free thought could think up such a beautiful protest against the Freedom Fields family. If I was a forager and could paint like my brother, I would fill this city with graffitis, Shifa thought. I'm just going to read to you from The Survivor Tree. So, without blowing the story, it may be that the authorities are not telling the young people the truth in this future land, and it may be that trees do exist somewhere. And there's one particular tree when they go to this school, and Shifa is mesmerised by it. Shifa gazed at the open countryside in awe. The land beyond the house sloped gently away, then flattened out to reveal what had not been visible last night. Right in the middle of a wide path stood a giant tree, its trunk so dark it resembled gnarled rock. The great arching branches and gold and mustard leaf canopy spread out far and wide, casting dappled shadows over the fields. Their procession slowed and came to a standstill as the recruits admired this rare view of open farmland. Is that real? Shifa asked Ailish. She nodded. Best thing about this place. Shifa gasped. I think it's called a cathedral oak. Ailish shrugged. We call it our survivor tree. They say it's 1,000 years old. How do you know what kind of tree it is anyway? My papa, Kara, he taught us all about them. The amazing thing about woods and trees that you might be inspired to write about is you never know what's going to happen. So a few minutes ago, you will have heard a dog barking. People meet in the wood. So, for my story, Red Leaves, which is actually set in this wood, the sound of people chatting intrigues me and makes me want to kind of follow their stories. Sometimes when I'm lost, when I'm writing a story, I think of my characters kind of standing by particular trees, and I think I'm going to go down a certain path when I'm writing my stories. But in fact, almost the characters go to no, excuse me, I'm Elder, and actually I live at the top of this tree. You may think I'm a homeless woman, but in fact I am the ancient spirit of the wood. If you want to find out who I am, then you're going to need to look up, and you're going to need to listen to your imagination, and you're going to need to tune in to the random. Here we have another dog coming over, you see. This random stuff can happen. It's padding over, running around the tree. That could give you the idea for a story. So I would suggest that everybody that is writing about the tree, a tree that's special to you, go and be in that tree, climb that tree safely as you can, sit with the tree, notice different things about it, even, make rubbings of the bark and see if you can find words that kind of match the kind of scaly, gnarly texture of the tree. See what else is living around the tree, what other things are growing from it, like fungi. I find fungi very interesting, and it's in quite a few of my stories too. So this is my most recent novel, When Shadows Fall. I'm always doing this kind of random stuff where if you turn this tree over, it is actually the boy that becomes the trunk of the tree, and the canopy of the tree is here. It goes from being a tree, a boy standing near a tree, to a parachute. So as you are writing your stories inspired by the tree, I would suggest you go as random as you want. And if you like researching, for example, if you research what an elder tree's qualities are, you'll find that it has all sorts of symbols connected to the story. In When Shadows Fall, the memory tree or the memorial tree that is planted is a eucalyptus tree. And if you research about eucalyptus trees, if you take the leaf and you burn the leaf, it's supposed to be purifying. So all of these kind of threads lead me to telling a story. I'm hoping that you're going to go to your tree after this and just sit with it, do some doodles, daydream a bit, come up with some words, come up with some images, and then let your random imagination float through the woods. Listen to the stories, listen to the random sounds, the people, the person cycling through on a bike, the person calling after them, the bird song, the ancient homeless woman walking through the wood, as in Red Leaves, with a doll, talking to a doll. What could be her story? The wild, raucous bird song, all of it, the laughter, all of this will give you your inspiration to write about the tree. Good luck.